Some names disappear from history because they were forgotten. Others disappear because someone wanted them erased. In the deepest corners of Alabama's Black Belt, where endless cotton fields stretch beneath a burning southern sun, old families whispered of a woman whose name was never spoken above a murmur. Mothers warned their daughters about her. Fathers refused to answer questions whenever the story surfaced. Even generations later, yellowed letters hidden inside locked wooden chests hinted at a terrifying mystery. They called her Hannah. Some believed she was a victim. Others believed she was a monster. But nearly everyone agreed on one thing. Where Hannah appeared, families fell apart. And by the time anyone realized what she was truly doing, 3 powerful households had already destroyed themselves from within. The truth, however, was far more complicated than the legends. In the Alabama of the 1850s, wealth was measured not by gold hidden in safes, but by acres of cotton and the number of enslaved people forced to work them. The great plantations stood like kingdoms surrounded by endless rows of white blossoms, their grand columns shining in the sunlight while suffering remained hidden behind kitchens, smokehouses, slave quarters, and whipping posts. Every morning before sunrise, bells echoed across the fields. Chains rattled, doors opened. Children barely old enough to carry water followed exhausted parents into endless rows of cotton. Women balanced impossible workloads, raising children while picking crops under the watchful eyes of overseers. Men bent beneath impossible expectations, knowing punishment waited for anyone whose body failed before the day's labor ended. The plantation house seemed peaceful from a distance. Inside, fear lived in every room. Owners feared rebellion. Mistresses feared betrayal. Children feared disappointing fathers. Enslaved families feared everything. It was a world built upon silence. And silence became the greatest weapon of all. On one humid spring morning in 1854, a wagon rolled slowly toward the sprawling Whitmore plantation outside Selma. Dust rose behind its wooden wheels as chained men and women sat without speaking. Most stared at the road. A few quietly prayed. Among them sat a young woman wrapped in a faded brown dress. She kept her hands folded calmly in her lap. Unlike the others, she did not cry. She did not plead. She simply watched. The slave trader riding beside the wagon glanced toward her more than once. Something about the young woman unsettled even him. She looked no older than 22. Her face revealed almost nothing. Her eyes revealed far too much. They were patient, careful, always observing. When the wagon reached the plantation yard, buyers gathered beneath the shade of giant oak trees. They examined muscles, checked teeth, measured backs. Families were separated with little more emotion than livestock at market. Children screamed. Mothers begged. Fathers clenched trembling fists they dared not raise. The young woman remained silent. Colonel Nathaniel Whitmore noticed her immediately. "What's her name?" he asked. "Hannah," the trader answered. "Can she read?" The trader hesitated. "Not that I've seen. It was a lie." He simply wasn't certain how much Hannah actually knew. Colonel Whitmore studied her for several long seconds before nodding. "I'll take her." Those 4 words changed more lives than anyone standing there could possibly imagine. The Whitmore household represented a respectable Southern society admired. Nathaniel Whitmore was wealthy, disciplined, respected by neighboring landowners, and politically connected throughout central Alabama. His wife, Eleanor, managed the enormous household with quiet authority. Their eldest son, Charles, had recently returned from school in Montgomery. Their younger daughter, Rebecca, spent afternoons practicing piano while dreaming of marrying into another prosperous plantation family. To outsiders, the Whitmores appeared perfect. But perfection often hides the deepest fractures. Nathaniel carried crushing debts hidden beneath impressive appearances. Charles secretly despised plantation life. Rebecca longed for freedom beyond arranged expectations. Eleanor suspected her husband concealed far more than financial worries. Their beautiful home rested upon cracks already spreading beneath its foundation. Hannah simply arrived at exactly the right moment. Assigned first to kitchen duties, Hannah worked with remarkable precision. She learned routines quickly. She remembered names effortlessly. Most importantly, she listened. Servants talked when they believed no one important was nearby. Housemaids overheard conversations while cleaning bedrooms. Stable boys carried gossip between neighboring plantations. Children revealed secrets adults never intended to share. Within weeks, Hannah understood the Whitmore family better than many lifelong servants. She learned Nathaniel visited town more often than business required. She noticed Eleanor quietly crying after reading certain letters. She observed Charles avoiding his father's gaze during dinner. She discovered Rebecca secretly meeting a young school teacher whose family owned almost nothing. Every smile, every whispered argument, every hidden glance. Hannah stored them away like precious coins. No one realized she was assembling pieces of a much larger puzzle. Months passed. Then something strange began happening. Colonel Whitmore started questioning servants about missing documents. Private account books disappeared. Important letters could not be found. One evening, Nathaniel accused Charles of stealing financial records. Charles denied everything. Voices rose throughout the dining room. Rebecca fled in tears. Eleanor tried desperately to calm both men. Watching quietly from the doorway while serving supper, Hannah lowered her eyes before anyone noticed the smallest hint of satisfaction crossing her face. The argument ended without answers, but suspicion had entered the house. And once suspicion enters, it rarely leaves alone. Autumn arrived with heavy rains. Cotton wagons struggled through muddy roads while plantation profits continued shrinking. Nathaniel grew increasingly desperate. Creditors began writing demanding payment. His temper worsened. Punishments across the plantation became harsher. Fear spread among everyone living there. During one violent storm, Eleanor discovered another anonymous note hidden inside her sewing basket. It contained only one sentence. Your husband has another family who knows nothing about you. No signature, no explanation, just those devastating words. Eleanor stared at the paper until the ink blurred beneath falling tears. Who had written it? Was it true? Or was someone trying to destroy her marriage? She confronted Nathaniel that very night. The argument lasted until dawn. Servants later whispered they had never heard such shouting from the grand house. Nathaniel denied everything. Eleanor believed almost nothing. Their marriage never fully recovered. Across the plantation yard, Hannah continued her duties exactly as before. Always respectful, always quiet, always invisible. Yet somehow, every new secret seemed to find its way into the right hands. Rebecca soon received an unsigned letter describing Charles' gambling debts. Charles discovered documents suggesting his father planned to disinherit him. Nathaniel heard rumors that Eleanor intended to leave him. Each revelation pushed the family further toward collapse. Still, no one asked the obvious question: who knew every secret? Winter settled over Alabama with bitter winds sweeping through empty cotton fields. One freezing evening, Charles followed Hannah as she carried laundry toward the servants' quarters. "You seem different from everyone else," he said softly. She stopped walking. "I only do my work, sir. You listen more than you speak." She offered the faintest smile. People often answer questions that were never asked. Charles frowned. "What does that mean?" Hannah looked toward the distant Plouston plantation house, glowing beneath lantern light. "It means houses fall apart long before they collapse." Then she continued walking into the darkness. Charles stood frozen. He could not explain why those words unsettled him so deeply. Inside the Whitmore home, another crisis was already beginning. Nathaniel's largest creditor unexpectedly arrived, demanding immediate repayment. Unable to produce the money, Nathaniel mortgaged additional land without informing Eleanor. Charles discovered the agreement. Rebecca overheard the confrontation. Servants carried fragments of every argument throughout the plantation. The atmosphere became poisonous. Every family member suspected another. Every conversation carried hidden meaning. Every silence became unbearable. Yet beyond the Whitmore estate, neighboring plantations had started hearing rumors. Stories of financial scandal, marital betrayal, secret affairs, hidden debts, strange anonymous letters. Within months, respected families refused invitations to Whitmore dinners. Business partners became cautious. Marriage proposals quietly disappeared. The Whitmore name, once admired across Dallas County, began attracting whispers instead of respect. Still, no one could trace where the rumors began. Only Hannah knew that every carefully planted doubt had taken root exactly as intended. And as the first family slowly unraveled, two neighboring households had already begun inviting Hannah into their homes for temporary domestic work during social gatherings, never realizing that the same quiet observer who had watched one house crumble was now about to step across the thresholds of two more. The destruction of the Whitmores had only begun, and the secrets Hannah carried into the next homes would prove even more devastating. By the spring of 1855, Hannah's name had become familiar among the wealthiest plantations surrounding Selma. To every mistress who met her, she seemed unusually capable. To every master, she appeared obedient. To the enslaved workers, however, she remained impossible to understand. She never raised her voice. She never argued. She rarely smiled. Yet wherever she stayed, peace slowly disappeared, as though she carried an invisible storm that only revealed itself after she was gone. No one suspected that Hannah had learned the greatest lesson slavery could teach. A person without power could still control those who believed they possessed it all. The Whitmore plantation had become a house filled with suspicion. Colonel Nathaniel Whitmore scarcely trusted his own family. Eleanor searched every room for hidden letters. Charles spent long evenings drinking alone, while Rebecca pleaded for permission to marry the schoolteacher she loved. Every conversation ended in accusations. Every meal ended in silence. Then, unexpectedly, Hannah was sent to assist during a week-long gathering at the neighboring Ashford plantation. Colonel Benjamin Ashford welcomed the Whitmores with elaborate dinners, expensive wine, and polished manners. His estate was larger, richer, and even more respected throughout Alabama. But beneath its elegant appearance hid another collection of dangerous secrets. Benjamin Ashford was ruthless. His wife, Margaret, had spent years pretending their marriage was happy. Their eldest son, William, secretly opposed slavery, but feared speaking against his father. Their youngest daughter, Caroline, dreamed of escaping Alabama altogether. The Ashford house looked magnificent beneath the afternoon sun. To Hannah, it looked painfully familiar. Large homes always held larger lies. Within hours of arriving, Hannah had already memorized the household routines. She knew which servants carried messages. She knew which doors remained unlocked after midnight. She knew where Benjamin stored his business records. Most importantly, she discovered who trusted whom. That knowledge was worth more than money. During the grand dinner on the second evening, laughter echoed through crystal chandeliers, while musicians played softly in the corner. Plantation owners discussed cotton prices. Politicians debated new laws. Women exchanged polite compliments. Everything appeared civilized. Hannah moved quietly between tables, pouring coffee without attracting attention. Yet she noticed every glance. Benjamin Ashford lingered far too long whenever Rebecca Whitmore entered the room. Margaret noticed. Charles noticed. Even Hannah noticed. Tiny moments often destroyed entire families. They simply needed someone willing to expose them. The following morning, Margaret discovered a folded note resting inside her prayer book. It read only 7 words. Watch your husband when Rebecca visits again. No signature, no explanation. Her hands began shaking. At first, she tried dismissing it as a cruel joke. But once doubt entered her mind, every innocent conversation appeared suspicious. Every smile became evidence. Every glance became betrayal. Benjamin sensed his wife's growing distance, but could not understand why. The poison had already begun spreading. Hannah continued serving breakfast as though nothing had happened. By week's end, another anonymous letter reached William Ashford. It claimed his father planned to sell several enslaved families despite promising otherwise. William confronted Benjamin immediately. You gave them your word. Benjamin slammed his fist against the desk. You question me because of anonymous lies? Then tell me they're false. Benjamin remained silent. That silence answered everything. The argument exploded throughout the house. Servants listened from behind closed doors. Within hours, the entire plantation knew. Trust disappeared almost overnight. But Hannah's work extended beyond anonymous letters. She understood something far more dangerous. People often revealed their deepest fears when someone simply listened without judgment. Late one evening, Caroline found Hannah sewing beside a lantern. "May I ask you something?" Caroline whispered. Hannah looked up quietly. "If you could leave this place forever," Caroline hesitated. "Would you?" For several long seconds, Hannah said nothing. Finally, she answered, "Every bird dreams of the sky." Caroline smiled sadly. "I dream of New York. And your father, he would never allow it." Hannah returned to her sewing. "Then perhaps your father will soon have greater worries." Caroline frowned. "What do you mean?" Hannah simply lowered her eyes. The future often arrives unexpectedly. Caroline left more confused than before. She never realized Hannah already knew enough to tear her family apart. Weeks later, the Whitmores returned home, but the invisible damage traveled with them. Rumors began moving from plantation to plantation faster than horseback riders. Some claimed Benjamin Ashford intended to abandon his wife. Others insisted Nathaniel Whitmore faced bankruptcy. Still others whispered that powerful families were secretly stealing from one another. Every rumor contained just enough truth to become believable. No one knew their source. Business partnerships dissolved. Marriage negotiations collapsed. Neighbors stopped trusting neighbors. Even church gatherings grew tense. Alabama's wealthiest community had become trapped inside a web of suspicion. Meanwhile, Hannah remained nearly invisible. Summer arrived with unbearable heat. One afternoon, an exhausted, stable hand quietly approached Hannah near the well. "You hear everything," he whispered. She continued drawing water. "I hear many things. They say Colonel Whitmore is losing everything." She did not answer. "They also say Ashford's son plans to leave." Still silence. Finally, the young man asked the question others had begun wondering. "Who starts these stories?" For the first time, Hannah looked directly into someone's eyes. People tell themselves the stories they already fear. The stable hand walked away without understanding. But Hannah understood perfectly. She had never forced anyone to believe anything. She simply placed small seeds into frightened hearts. Fear did the rest. Then came the event no one expected. Colonel Nathaniel Whitmore received official notice that one of his largest loans had been called due immediately. Unable to pay, he risked losing hundreds of acres. Desperate, he sought financial help from Benjamin Ashford. Benjamin refused. The friendship between the two families ended that afternoon. Their heated argument became the talk of every plantation in the county. Old alliances shattered. Longtime friends chose sides. Everyone searched for someone to blame. No one noticed Hannah quietly observing from the background. That night, Eleanor Whitmore confronted her husband one final time. "Our family is falling apart." Nathaniel stared into the fireplace. "They've turned everyone against us." "Who?" He had no answer, because he genuinely did not know. Across the county, another wealthy household prepared to enter Hannah's life. The Carter family owned one of the largest cotton plantations in western Alabama. Judge Samuel Carter had built his reputation upon strict honor and unwavering discipline. His wife, Elizabeth, was admired for her charity. Their two grown sons managed thousands of acres. To outsiders, they appeared untouched by the scandals consuming neighboring plantations. They believed their family was different, safer, stronger. They were wrong. Late that autumn, Elizabeth Carter requested temporary household assistance while preparing for an enormous harvest celebration. Benjamin Ashford recommended Hannah. So quiet, he said, so dependable. If only every servant worked like her. Benjamin unknowingly delivered the greatest threat his own community had ever known directly into another unsuspecting home. As Hannah's wagon disappeared down the dusty road toward the Carter estate, she looked back only once. Behind her stood two families already consumed by distrust. Ahead waited the third. But unlike the Whitmores and the Ashfords, the Carters possessed a secret buried so deeply that exposing it would destroy not only a household, but an entire legacy. And for the first time since arriving in Alabama, Hannah was no longer acting only for survival. She had finally found the truth she had been searching for since the day she was sold into slavery. A truth connected to her own past, hidden inside the Carter family's walls. The quiet servant who seemed to drift from plantation to plantation had been following a trail all along. The final pieces of the puzzle were waiting behind the doors of the Carter house, where revenge and justice were about to become impossible to tell apart. The Carter plantation stood on a gentle rise, overlooking miles of cotton fields that shimmered beneath the autumn sun. Its white columns, trimmed hedges, and sprawling gardens projected wealth and order. But Hannah had learned long ago that beautiful houses often sheltered the darkest truths. The moment she stepped inside, she felt something different. Not fear, recognition. Portraits of generations lined the entrance hall. Polished floors reflected the afternoon light pouring through tall windows. Servants moved quickly with lowered eyes, careful never to speak unless spoken to. Everything appeared perfect. Yet Hannah noticed something no one else seemed to see. One portrait was missing. A large empty space remained on the wall where another painting had once hung. Someone had deliberately removed it. That absence spoke louder than every portrait still hanging. As the harvest celebration approached, guests poured into the Carter estate from across Alabama. Among them were the Whitmores, the Ashfords, judges, bankers, politicians. Men whose fortunes had been built on cotton, land, and enslaved labor gathered beneath crystal chandeliers, laughing as musicians played while servants silently filled their glasses. No one imagined that before the celebration ended, decades of carefully hidden lies would begin unraveling. Hannah moved quietly through the crowded rooms carrying silver trays. She listened. Judge Samuel Carter spoke confidently about honor. Benjamin Ashford complained about dishonest neighbors. Nathaniel Whitmore looked older than he had only months before. Financial ruin had hollowed his face. Every conversation revealed another crack. Then Hannah heard something that made her stop walking. Judge Carter leaned toward Benjamin Ashford. We must ensure no one ever learns what happened in Greene County. Benjamin's smile disappeared. After all these years, no one remembers. They must never remember. The conversation ended as guests approached. But Hannah had heard enough. Greene County. The name echoed inside her mind. That was where she had been born. That was where her mother had disappeared. For years, she had searched for answers. Now, for the first time, the trail had led directly to the Carter family. That night, after the guests retired, Hannah quietly entered the plantation library. She knew wealthy families often hid their greatest secrets in places they believed servants would never enter. Inside an old cabinet, she found ledgers dating back nearly 30 years, bills of sale, property records, plantation accounts. Then, a smaller leather-bound journal tucked behind a row of law books. Its pages had yellowed with age. As she carefully turned them, her breathing slowed. One entry froze her completely. Purchased female child after the incident. Mother's identity removed from county records to avoid future claims. There was no name, only a date. The exact year Hannah had been born. She continued reading. Each sentence revealed another terrible truth. Years earlier, Judge Carter and two neighboring plantation owners had secretly arranged the illegal sale of several mixed-race children to erase evidence of relationships that could destroy their reputations. Records had been altered, families had been separated, names erased forever. One of those children was Hannah. The room fell silent. Everything she had believed about her past suddenly changed. She had spent years thinking she had simply been another child sold through the ordinary cruelty of slavery. Instead, she had been deliberately erased. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because powerful men feared the truth. For a long moment, Hannah stood motionless. Tears gathered in her eyes. Not tears of weakness. Tears for a mother whose name had been stolen. A family she would never know. A childhood deliberately taken from her. Then she quietly closed the journal. Her search was over. Now another journey would begin. The following evening, the grand harvest banquet filled the Carter mansion with music and laughter once again. Candles illuminated long dining tables covered in silver and crystal. Guests toasted prosperity. Outside, enslaved workers watched from the darkness beyond the windows. Two different worlds existed only a few yards apart. As dinner progressed, whispers began spreading through the room. Someone had delivered anonymous packets to several guests. Inside each packet were copied pages from old plantation records, financial agreements, secret land transactions, evidence of illegal sales, letters proving business partners had deceived one another for years. The room erupted into confusion. Benjamin Ashford accused Judge Carter. Nathaniel Whitmore demanded explanations. Old allies became furious enemies within minutes. Voices echoed through the mansion. Years of hidden resentment exploded into open conflict. Judge Carter slammed his hand upon the table. Who brought these lies into my house? No one answered. Guests looked suspiciously at one another. Every face reflected fear, not because they knew the truth, because they feared someone else did. In the middle of the chaos, Hannah quietly stood, near the doorway. For the first time since arriving in Alabama, she lifted her eyes without lowering them. Judge Carter noticed. Their eyes met. Something in her expression unsettled him. "Who are you?" he demanded. Hannah spoke calmly. "My mother asked that same question before you erased her from your records." Silence. The room became still. Judge Carter's face lost its color. Benjamin Ashford stared in disbelief. Nathaniel Whitmore looked from one face to another, unable to understand. Hannah reached into her apron and placed the leather journal upon the table. "You buried names." She rested her hand on the faded cover. "You separated children." Another long silence. "You believed paper could erase people." Judge Carter's hands trembled. "Where did you find that?" "I found what you spent 30 years hiding." No one moved. The only sound was the crackling fire. Judge Carter slowly lowered himself into his chair. He suddenly looked like an old man carrying a lifetime of guilt. No dramatic confession followed. No one shouted. Sometimes truth speaks loudest in silence. Guests quietly left the dining room, one by one. Some carried copies of the documents. Others carried questions they could never forget. Within weeks, rumors spread across Alabama. Business partnerships collapsed. Political careers ended. Court investigations quietly began into fraudulent land records and disputed property claims. The Whitmore family lost much of its fortune, but slowly rebuilt relationships once poisoned by suspicion. Rebecca finally left Alabama with the school teacher she loved. Charles abandoned plantation life altogether. The Ashford family never fully recovered from the distrust that had consumed them. William left home, determined never to build his future upon slavery. Judge Samuel Carter lived only a few more years. Those who knew him said he rarely entered the grand dining room again. The empty portrait space in the hallway remained empty until the day the house itself fell into ruin. As for Hannah, history never recorded exactly where she went. No monument bears her name. No official document celebrates her courage. Perhaps that is because history often remembers powerful men while forgetting those who challenge them. Or perhaps someone preferred her story remain buried. But whether she became legend or memory, one truth endured. The wealthy families who believed chains guaranteed control discovered that the greatest threat they ever faced carried no weapon. She carried patience, she carried memory, and she carried a truth that could not be buried forever. Some later generations called her dangerous, others called her ruthless. Yet perhaps they misunderstood what truly frightened those powerful families. It was never Hannah herself. It was the simple fact that even in a world built upon fear and silence, one determined woman refused to let the past remain hidden. The names of grand plantations have faded. Their mansions have crumbled. Their fortunes have vanished into history. But every forgotten record, every hidden diary, and every whispered family secret reminds us that no injustice remains buried forever, because history has an unusual way of waiting for the one voice willing to uncover what everyone else worked so hard to conceal. And when that voice finally speaks, even the most powerful families can no longer escape the truth.